Namaskar. Namaskar and welcome to the Eikam series of Gita on the Go. And today we bring you into chapter 2. Chapter 2 is called the Samkhya Yoga, and literally translated, it is the enumeration of the principles of Bhagwad Gita and yoga that have been summarized in this chapter. Now, what this chapter actually does is that think of it as the summary chapter where all the principles across chapter 3 that are discussed between chapter 3 to chapter 18 are summarized aphoristically with slight meanings, and therefore this, to me personally, and I say this as a more recent convert to the Bhagavad Gita, this has been by far the most important chapter. This is like the super summary of the Bhagavad Gita. Having said that, what we will discuss in this particular episode is 3 principles that particularly stand out. We will be talking more about them as Samir will tell you when we have our conversation. But the 3 phases or 3 principles or the 3 states of existence that particularly stand out for me from chapter 2 is the first one is the whole idea of or the concept of the ego and the surrender of it, therefore, if you need to learn something. In order to grow, in order to evolve, it is about the surrender of the ego. We'll see how Arjuna and Sri Krishna deal with it as well. The second aspect of chapter 2 that I want to particularly highlight or we want to talk about is the whole concept of karma. And more importantly, before we get into the theory of karma, what we want to talk about is busting some myths around them and the misunderstandings that we approach the karma theory with. So that's the second thing we want to discuss and highlight from chapter 2. The third one that we want to discuss and talk about is emotions, is where they arise from, how they get amplified, how does the process of emotion play out, and therefore the consequences of those. So to me, these are the 3 that we are picking. Of course, there's a lot more, and we will be discussing every one of those themes across chapter 3 to 18. But Samir, correct me if I'm wrong, but these are the 3 themes that you and I have spoken most about and that have been most applicable and practicable from chapter 2, which is the Samkhya Yoga, which is the enumeration of principles from the Bhagavad Gita.
So, right, Eika, you are right in saying that all the principles are aphoristically. When we say aphoristically means, इसे हम लोग हमारे शास्त्र में सूत्र बोलते हैं, जो एक छोटे से एक पिथी सेंटेंस के अंदर में पूरी चीज को कंप्रेस करके हमारे सामने प्रेजेंट किया जाता है. उसे फिर समझने के लिए उसकी डिटेलिंग, there's a very lot of detailing that is necessary, right? I'm going to digress here, but let's start off with the first Vakya or the first Sutra of the Brahma Sutras. Another very, very deep text, and it starts off with, therefore Brahma Jigyasa, Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Now, how do you start a story with therefore? Now, it obviously therefore presumes that some things must have happened, and that's how it's very concise, it's very pithy.
Also how the Patanjali Yoga Sutras begin.
Yes, of course, even the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. And chapter 2 is also very, very similar in the sense that it compresses a whole bunch of knowledge into a set of 72 slokas. And that makes it obviously, for a person, when you say you use it as a summary, you know what, I see people going to ChatGPT and summarizing stuff and reading books on summary. The Gita is not a book that you can read that way. So you go back to the summary after you've read the whole thing. But you've rightly picked up 3 very important areas. There are obviously lots of other ideas, and each of these shlokas can be dwelt on in detail. But what is important is you've picked up on the first one, which is the surrender of the ego. So should we start talking about that a little bit?
That's where we left off.
Okay. So we talked about in the chapter 1, we talked about the body, the mind, the intellect, but what runs all of this? That's the ego, right? And when we say it's the ego, it's that sense of I am not the body, I'm not the mind, I have an individual existence. Now, this individual existence of me, mine, that ownership, all of that is called the ego. and in the classical sense, it's called the aham bhava. Now, this aham bhava, as long as I am so reminded at this point of time of a particular doha of Kabir. I don't remember, I'm not a student of Kabir, but I remember this doha. I'll give you the translation because I don't remember the exact words. And he says, when I am there, Hari is not. And when Hari is there, we are both there. Such a beautiful statement. That's the entire sense of the ego. When the ego is there, I remember another Christian, my school fathers, who said, ego stands for edging God out. Now, in our sense, we're not looking at God, we're not looking at any definition of God here, but what we are looking at is even knowledge. Do you remember that story of the Zen master who poured tea into the cup?
Of course, it's on my favorite koans.
Correct. And you see, that's exactly what we all are. We carry so much baggage. We carry so much baggage. And since I come from Bengal and I love rasgullas, I normally metaphorically speak of all my baggage as tins and bhards and pots of rasgullas of various types. Right? The Guder Rasgulla, the warm Rasgulla, and all sorts of Rasgullas. We carry so many of them, right? All the time. But we don't even realize that we're carrying them. So we've come to a point where after that nervous breakdown, Arjuna now realizes that he can't go forward without guidance.
I'm very tempted. I'm sorry to interrupt here, but as you were talking about this whole idea and we were talking about the kwan of the tea and baggages we carry, and last time we spoke about the idea about how it is important, how Sri Krishna forced that breakdown on Arjuna before he could be rebuilt back up. And I'm very tempted to share that's actually the journey that I was on, Samir. So I used to be this angry young woman, at war with the world, and my corporate world was war and my home was war. And I was always in a state of war and proving a point. And I remember that when I had what I call my first rebirth and therefore stepped into my second life, now I'm on my third. But that rebirth, and I still remember very vividly that date when that rebirth happened. And Samir, what I remember of that day is that I was just khali. I was just absolutely khali. I'd been through a 2-year journey of completely breaking down. It started with a physical breakdown, moved into an intellectual breakdown where everything that I held true was challenged and therefore dismissed. And then I went through an emotional breakdown. I actually left that corporate world that I was so attached to. And I still remember that day of being absolutely khali. Matlab, if you just cut me up and I'd gone to Banerjee that day, I would have gone with a 0 PNL. And why I remember it so preciously and why it's so precious to me is because that truly allowed me to then fill myself up or consume or intake everything. There was nothing to be unpacked, unbaggaged. Everything was so fresh, so new. I'm very grateful for that transformation right now. So I can relate to when you're talking about being the Arjun and the transformation that Arjun needed and the emptying out and the nervous breakdown that Bhagwan Sri Krishna forced him on. I hadn't seen it like.
So thank you, Eika, for sharing that very, very personal note, because it brings out the fact that we all are Arjuns. And sometimes, unless we get back inside and introspect, we just can't get out and improve. So I love the saying which says the only way out is in. So, and so let's go to what Arjun says. When he's finished this breakdown, he's realized that he can't move forward and he's completely stuck. And at that point of time, he says in chapter 2, verse 7, Karpanya doshopahata swabhavaha prichhami tvam dharma sammudha chetaha yachreyasya nishchitam bruhi tanme Shishyasteham shadi mam tvam prapannam. Eika. He starts off by saying Karpanya dosha. Karpanya. Can you think of a word which resonates with this? Some other word in Hindi? Bengali?
No, to me it brings to mind the idea of Kair and it brings in the idea of karuna.
Word karpanya is actually comes from the word kripan. Kripan means miser, right? Now, what does a miser do? Miser says, me, mine.
Karpanya as a sound brings in the sense of...
Sure, I can understand that. But there is a whole bit of karuna here because he is surrendering. We will see that word also. But here the karpanya, and he recognizes the fact that karpanya doshopahata svabhavaha, my nature has been demolished, it has been destroyed by my continual possession of what I believe is me and mine. As long as I'm clinging, can you think of that clingingness that is here? And in that clingingness, I have realized that I am not able to go forward. And hence my intellect has got completely confused. I don't know what's my duty. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I know now that I am in a battlefield and I know that I want to run away. And I realize that that might not be the right thing to do. I am confused. And therefore he says, please tell me what is good for me. Please tell me what is good for me. He says, Mam Tvam Prapannam. I surrender to you. What does he surrender? Surrender doesn't mean he falls flat on the ground and he says, Aap jo bolenge main karunga. It's not that. He's saying, I give up my ego. I give up my holding of my knowledge. I give up the fact that I know all. I can learn. It's such a powerful statement. I love, when I teach on a shloka by shloka basis, I actually, one of the things that I do here is this particular shloka we dwell on by reciting it 3-4 times and try and bring that feeling of surrender in us. Because unless we have actually surrendered our own ego, Bhagwad Gita is not going to teach us anything.
Nobody's going to teach us anything, Samir.
Exactly. Nothing is going to teach us anything because I'm so full of myself. And that fullness is what Arjun here gives up. Are we? It's a big question, Eika. I don't know if we all are ready to even answer this, but it's a big question. Are we ready to give up that clingingness to my knowledge, my intellect, my emotions, my physicality, my all that I hold as me and mine? Am I even ready to say, yes, I'm ready to give it up, even if it's temporary? Am I ready to give it up?
So, Samir, I have a bigger question on this, and I'm going back to my own self 15 years ago when I went through this process. And my question is, are we even equipped? Is there anything that we are ever taught? Is there anything that ever exists in us instinctively that even enables us? So, this sense of I taking myself out, or I need to surrender. Do we even know the I? B, do I know what I need to give up? What is this that I need to give up?
So thanks for raising this question. It's a very important question that actually Sri Krishna tries to answer for us. Sri Krishna answers. We have to try and understand across the next few chapters from chapter 3 onwards. But let me ask you this question. Okay, don't answer it. What's your weight now? Don't answer it.
Right? Never mind.
Okay, but can you tell me your weight when you were born?
Yeah, 2.8 kilos.
Okay, and let's assume it's 30 times more than now.
I'm not commenting. Next.
Okay. Okay. Has your sense of I increased by 30 times?
Yeah.
Your sense of I is the same. Your I which was there, the same I that was the 12-year-old slim wayfly girl jumping around in Dehradun is not the same physical being that is sitting right now in Delhi, is it? But your sense of I hasn't changed. Let me ask you a different question. So your body is not you. Now you woke up, let's say that you woke up in the morning and you saw your loved ones around you, your daughters, your husband, your beautiful environment. You woke up happy. And then you get a message saying that your maid isn't coming.
Oh, that's a disaster.
See what happened? So which is the real you? The one which is saying, this is a disaster, I am troubled, I am in stress, I have a shooting to do, I have this recording to do today, and I have all of this happening right now, and that's the time the maid is, or was it you who was the happy you when you woke up? So you're not the mind.
No.
Okay, and I'll give you a personal example. When I was in college, I was a hardcore communist. And then I became a chartered accountant and I joined profession, and I switched over and I became a hardcore capitalist, Ayn Rand capitalist, right? Now, which is the real me, the communist or the capitalist? So I'm not the intellect either.
Yeah.
So unless I learn to question the fact that I am something which is different from my body, from my mind, from my intellect, I will never go forward. So firstly, while we can't really answer that right now, and I think Krishna answers it later on, but let's see what we are not. And what we are not is our body, mind, intellect. And what we do is...
Therefore, the first step in acknowledging or recognizing or dropping your ego. Okay. So the first step in being able to learn is the need to drop your ego. Till you drop your ego, you don't learn. You don't grow, you don't evolve. And in order to drop your ego, the first thing that needs to happen is the awareness,
yes,
or the realization or the identification that I am not my body, not my mind, and not my intellect.
Correct. Absolutely. Very rightly summarized. Mm-hmm. And so that is the one large concept that we need to understand. And I think the question we should leave to our viewers and to ourselves also is that are we ready to drop that baggage that we carry of our identification with our body, mind, intellect?
Right.
I think the second topic that you raised was the topic of karma. Is there a specific question that you have around that?
So I know that there is, we will be doing karma yoga later, but I also think that karma is a very much misunderstood and a much abused term as well, right? There is both a sense of destiny with karma, and yet there is also destiny and fatalism with karma, and there is also a sense of will, of individual will with karma, of free will, right? So I know that we will unpack karma later, but I think the biggest myth we live with is the whole karmanyeva adhikaraste. Chapter 2, Shloka 47, and that's really when we bring it together.
Yes. Karm kiye ja, phal ki chinta mat kar.
Possibly the most quoted shloka from the Bhagwad Gita.
Yes.
And I thought we could just spend some time just on that bit, just that shloka, because I know we will be discussing karma in much greater detail later.
So, firstly, we must understand that the entire Gita exposition is a series of dialogue. It's a dialogue. You cannot jump into the middle of a dialogue and say that you understood what's happening. I mean, that would be like starting a story with therefore. Now, so basically, if you look at karma, and that's chapter 3, which is Karma Yoga, and we slowly move. You see, the whole first concept at our level right now, where we are starting, is that we want to do something because we want to get something. Otherwise, why should I do something? Now let's look at a tree. And even the most insentient of a being, such as a tree, why does it produce fruit? Eika, why do you think it produces fruit? It has a desire to propagate. It has a desire to spread, right? It has a desire to, like to quote the Bible, go forth and multiply.
Correct.
Right? Now, it has that desire. So it's not about saying phal ki chinta mat kar. I know that there is a phal that I am aiming for. Let's start our journey there. Let's say that I have set a goal. But just imagine that you get out, you're a cricketer, you get out onto the cricket field, and you've decided that you're going to score a 6 over the long on boundary or whatever. I'm not a cricketer, so I'm possibly using wrong terms. But let's say that you're going to score a sixer over the long on boundary. Now, are you going to keep looking at the long on boundary, or are you going to keep looking at the ball?
The ball.
Obviously. Now, you've got the boundary in your mind, but can you claim that it is my right to be able to hit the ball over the boundary? Obviously not, right? So, while one of the interpretations of saying that adhikar means right, that's one way of looking at it, but adhikar also means control. And the easiest example, you go to any government office, you will see the term Lekha Adhikari, accounts controller, Vitta Adhikari, finance controller, Adhikari, controller, Adhikar, control. What is he talking about? He's saying Karmanyeva Adhikaraste. You have control over karma. You do not have control over the output. Now, we call it in today's parlance, we call it input management. Isn't it? I think Dr. Ramcharan wrote a very nice book on that.
Even Stephen Covey has covered this concept and the whole idea of lead input measures and the whole idea of...
Correct. Now, if my inputs are strong enough, if my inputs are continuously polished to a highest point of my ability, then the probability of the output being successful increases, isn't that?
It's about trusting the process.
So therefore, in the second line of the shloka, he clearly says, Ma karma phala hetu. Don't keep thinking only of the result. Just imagine a sales guy goes to a sales call and he's only thinking of the check and not of what he's going to talk to the salesperson, to the customer.
Talking about this shloka, we are not saying, contrary to what we were always told, ki karma karte jao, phal ki chinta mat karo. We are actually saying the reverse of saying ki yaar phal to hoga hi. What you need to do is to obtain that phala, aaj ka, abhi ka, in the here and the now, karma kya hai, and then trust the process that it will lead to the phala.
Which Eika then brings an inherent question in Arjuna's mind, and therefore as Arjuna we need to ask, to karma kaisa hona chahiye? And he answers that in chapter 2 verse 50, the last 3 words. He says, yoga karmasu kaushalam. He says, just put in your best. That's all.
And of course, Arjun is not very satisfied with that answer. Therefore, we have another entire chapter.
Yeah, obviously. But but the point here is very clear, isn't it? It says, concentrate on the process, set your goal. He's not telling us not to set a goal. He's saying very clearly, set a goal. Having set that goal, don't keep thinking only about the goal. Think about the process of the here and now. I like the term that you used. Be here, be now.
And in that process, make sure that you're all there.
So Eika, when you talked about all there, one of my mentors, when he was teaching me how to train as a corporate trainer, one of the things he did was he would come into the classroom and he says, "Are you all here?" Right? And we would all say yes. He said, no, you are 33% in the yesterday, in 33% in की lunch में क्या होने वाला है, only 33% यहाँ हो, उतना यहाँ रखो please. So very apt, isn't it, that we are all the time thinking about what happened in the past and we are either regretting it or we are living in the past or we are thinking about the future and being worried about the future. Instead of that, if we have set a goal, clear the process to that goal and concentrate all our efforts onto that goal, yoga karma kaushalam, the probability of our getting that goal becomes so much higher.
Samir, I think that this whole thing that you're talking about all of us being present all here now, is actually a very important one. The fact that we're going to, 3 things that we've said again with the whole idea of karma. The first, and unpacking karmanyavadhikaraste, the first is that you have to have a phala in mind. But you have the phala where it is meant to be. But it's important, and that's the second thing, to focus on the process and therefore bring yourself in the here and the now and say, abhi ka karma kya hai, yahan ka karma kya hai, which gets me that result when, and trust the process. Third thing linked to that is the whole idea of karmasu kaushalam, which is about saying that today do your best in what you're doing.
Absolutely.
That then, Samir, brings me to the third phase that we've been talking about in chapter 2, which is the whole idea of what is the role that emotions play. If it is just about action in the here and the now, so we've established the fact that there's desire for achievement, there's desire for something that needs to come to us. That desire, that want, that need has been translated into a process, into what is going to get me there, and that is translated into the karma, into the action of here and the now, which needs to be my best karma here and the now, right? Therefore, what is the role of emotions? ये तो बड़ी सिंपल सा एक लॉजिकल प्रोग्रेशन है. तो फिर क्यों अर्जुन डरा हुआ है? क्यों हम डरते हैं? क्यों हम घबराते हैं? क्यों हम आगे नहीं बढ़ पाते हैं?
So to answer this, I think we need to step back a little bit and try and understand. There's this whole bunch of WhatsApp, Instagram, YouTube thing about the hormones that we have with emotions, the sort of feel-good hormones, the endorphins and the cortisols and the adrenaline and all that, and you have put them up. And all the WhatsApp university के graduate doctors जो आपको बोलेंगे कि cortisol कम कर दो. अरे cortisol कम कैसे करेंगे? कॉर्टिसोल एंगर से आ रहा है, राइट, स्ट्रेस से आ रहा है. तो स्ट्रेस कैसे कम करूं? स्ट्रेस कहां से आया? नोबडी नोस.
स्ट्रेस कहां से आया?
स्ट्रेस कहां से आया ये तो कोई बता नहीं रहा है ना मेरे को. तो ये मुझे भगवद गीता बताता है. भगवद गीता मुझे बहुत क्लियरली बता रहा है कि स्ट्रेस कहां से आता है, दुख कहां से आता है, एंगर कहां से आता है, सुख कहां से आता है. ये मुझे भगवद गीता बताती है.
ओके,
तो लेट मी कोट. ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंसः संगस्तेषुपजायते संगात् संजायते कामः कामात् क्रोधोऽभिजायते. एका देखो यहाँ क्या बोल रहे हैं. See the logical progression of Krishna's thought. And you know what, these two slokas, 62 and 63, they have been called the ladder of fall. How does a human being fall from the glory of what we actually are? And why I'm saying glory? Because you know what, हमारे शास्त्र में बोलते हैं कि 84 लाख योनि, 84 lakh yonis, species we've gone through before we have come to this human birth. So Eika, in Viveka Chudamani, in verse 2, Bhagwan Shankaracharya, he tells us 9 steps to moksha. And you know what? He tells us that the first step is that we've got human birth.
I agree.
And I always say hopefully. So, and you know what we do with this is that we let our emotions take over our intellect. And I have to bring in the Kathopanishad here. You see, the Kathopanishad describes this entire construct very beautifully. It says that this body is this chariot. Okay, the body is like a chariot. Our senses are like the horses that drive this chariot. And the reins are the emotions. So if the reins are the emotions, then the intellect has to be controlling the emotions. And there is this eternal witness who's sitting there as the rider, who's just riding. He's enjoying the ride, right? Now, what will happen if the intellect can't control the reins? The reins therefore let go and the horses go all over the place. What will happen to the chariot?
Obviously, you will always be in a state of battle, war. You will always be firefighting, just trying to bring it all together.
Yeah, the chariot will overturn. I mean, just on this metaphor itself, the chariot will overturn, right? It will not go where it's supposed to go. So,
actually.
Yeah. So basically, just even using this metaphor, the order of things that he talks about is that the intellect controls the emotions, which in turn control the senses. In our lives, we just turn things around. And we let our emotions be the ruler of both sides, and therefore they let the senses go wherever they want, and they dominate the intellect, and therefore let not the intellect work with its main function of discrimination.
So let's pause this for a minute. In an ideal world, or in the epitome or our best self-existence as human beings, we need to start thinking and discriminating, and therefore being, I don't know if we can control our emotions, but therefore necessarily being aware of our emotions and how we're feeling, and therefore be in absolute conscious awareness of our senses, which are both about what I consume from the world and how I engage or put out.
Yes.
Now that logically makes sense, but what you said after that, I'm going to distill it out, which is about saying that what we do is we let our emotions control both the senses as well as the intellect. So therefore, as a result of that, what happens is that actually when I'm saying I think, that is also I feel or my emotions. And even when I say I want to do this, it's not necessarily what my sensorial engagement is, but that is also coming from my emotions.
Correct. So let's step backward and let's look at this particular shloka. And he stopped at saying that kamat krodho bhi jayate. So krodha means anger, right? But you tell me, when do you feel anger?
When I have desire.
Perfect, isn't it? So here that's what he's saying. Kamat krodho vijayate. He said this 5,000 years ago. He said that desire leads to my anger. What does this mean? It means
desire or expectation. So when I run this for workshops, when I ask people what was the last time you were angry about, that anger had to do with something that I wanted or desired or expected, and the world didn't turn around to my desire or my expectation.
Which most often does not. and therefore you have anger. So मुझे जो चाहिए वो मिला नहीं. Immediately the reaction is anger. Now where did desire come from?
Emotion.
Yes, where did the desire of emotion? Desire itself is an emotion. Where did that come from?
Where did that come from?
It came from, so it beautifully comes here and says that it came from attachment. I get attached to a certain concept. I got attached to a certain thing. I got attached to a certain state of being, and therefore I continually desire to be in that. Now, you know what? This is where you can start.
Krodha came from kama.
Yes.
And kama came from
attachment. Now, where did attachment come from?
Where did attachment come from?
Because my senses got engaged with that particular object. मैं रसगुल्ले के स्वाद के साथ जुड़ गया.
So attachment came from
my senses. Now what did I do therefore? Instead of allowing the intellect to dominate the sense, to dominate my emotions, to dominate my senses, I allowed my senses to dominate my emotions, to dominate my intellect. And hence he calls it the ladder of fall. And in verse 63, he goes on ultimately to say that we go into total destruction because our intellect also gets destroyed. Buddhi also becomes destroyed. And when our buddhi gets destroyed, we have no sense of discrimination. We can't judge what is right, what is wrong. We can't even judge what is good for me, what is not good for me.
So what we're saying is that this ladder of fall starts with my senses, sensorial, world engagement body.
Yes.
From there, I become attached to those senses. Your senses were so pleased by eating the rasgullas that you then got attached to the taste and the flavor of the rasgullas. From the attachment came the desire for more rasgullas. From the desire of more rasgullas came the kama se krodha. So from the desire of more rasgullas that you weren't getting, or your wife said you can't eat, became
or the quality of the rasgullas that I got was not according to my expectations.
I didn't fulfill me as much any which way. So whatever, and with every step of the ladder, actually the number of variables are increasing, especially the number of variables outside your control.
Correct.
And therefore, by the time you reach krodha, there could be anything that gives you krodha, right? Because of that one experience of the rasgulla that you've gotten attached to. Yes. And therefore, the krodha leads to no buddhi.
So, krodha leads to no buddhi because krodha then takes you to become deluded. Delusion takes you to your intellect being disturbed. Your intellect being disturbed gets you into your power of discernment getting destroyed.
Request you to actually read these shlokas.
Sure. So I read out 62 for you. I am going to read out 63 for you again, and 63 which takes us to buddhi, where the buddhi gets destroyed. So let's look at 63. Krodhat bhavati sammohaha, sammohat smriti vibhramaha, smriti bhramshad buddhi nasho, buddhi nashat pranashyati. Krodhat bhavati eka. We stopped at krodha in the last shloka. And now he says, krodha leads to my delusion. I'm deluded. I have false inputs coming in now.
Yes.
Right? I have false inputs. These false inputs now bring in my memory also to be getting distorted. इस दुकान में हर समय खराब ही रसगुल्ले मिलते हैं. Therefore, my memory, I am flavoring my own memory. I am distorting my own memory. When I distort my own memory, what happens? My intellect has no framework of reference in which it is going to function. It has no future. It's not looking at future because that's colored with anger. It's looking at the past, which has got colored with all the wrong emotions that I'm carrying with it. And now those wrong emotions and the future, my present, my ability to discern, my ability to have discrimination, my viveka is completely destroyed. And therefore he uses the word pranashyati, prakarshena nashyati, destroyed certainly.
Completely and utterly.
However, Eika, just one thought here. And I've had this question a number of times, and that's why I want to answer this before we move on, is that why does Krishna tell us how we fall? So quite often I'm asked this, and you know what? I always say that a ladder goes both ways, right?
I was going to ask you that question of saying that I understand the fall. The fall starts from the senses and ends at absolute and utter intellectual destruction, right? That's where the ladder of fall went.
Yeah.
But there must be a flip to it, no? So where do you start? It's not starting at the senses. You start with the intellect. Where do you start?
Correct. So you start with the intellect. Now, what is the intellect doing? It's discriminating, right? And it is also judging. Now, judging and discriminating are two slightly different levels of functioning, and I'm sure you understand that. But to make it a little simpler, judging is where we are looking at things by my own perception and saying this is good, this is bad.
Yes.
This is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad, this is good, not evil, this is good, pure, etc., etc. These judgmental standpoints that we take start us into if we stop being judgmental, we can reverse the ladder and move back towards controlling our senses. So
being aware of our judgments.
So one is being aware. The second, so here I'm going to use a bit of NLP, and this is something that I've learned from you, Eika, and is that can I just change the way I talk? Can I change the way I speak, and thereby influence my mind to start thinking in a particular way? So I've used this with myself, and then I've used this with told people to try and use this themselves also, is to say, let's practice this for a week and say, I will not tell people, ये खाना खराब है, ये खाना अच्छा है, वो जगह अच्छी है, वो जगह खराब है. Instead of that, I'm going to just change it and change the words to say, ये खाना मुझे पसंद नहीं आया. I mean, if you just change those words, do you see what we've done with this? And immediately, therefore, you have changed your large level judgmental, analytical behavior to a narrower level. You've made it smaller.
You've also snapped that neural pathway of the ladder. And correct.
And the moment you've done that, you've started looking at the ladder not as a ladder of fall, because we are already fallen. We can now look at it as a ladder of climbing up.
Excellent. So I'm going to summarize this, Samir. Basically, what we are saying, therefore, is that the ladder of fall starts with senses, moves to attachment, from attachment to anger.
Attachment to desire.
Attachment, desire, anger. From anger, I lead to Brahma and delusion. I also start corrupting my memory and the smriti.
Okay.
And from the smriti, therefore, I lead to absolute lack and destruction of my judgment and my thinking and my viveka capabilities, my discriminating capabilities.
Completely correct.
I get this. So I understand where we're coming from this. And the way to flip the ladder from being the ladder of fall to the ladder of rise is actually stopping this or being aware and flipping the perspective and starting to create alternate neural pathways right at the level of judgment and discrimination itself. And we'll talk about it further. Thank you so much for reminding me of what I preach all the time, which is about being aware of our words. And in fact, I take it to the next level where I say, every time you find yourself using a negative word, stop, pause and see why you're using the negative word. It helps you revise a judgment. From saying ye khana kharab hai to mujhe khana pasand nahi aaya, I would actually, and Samir, this one's for you then, that if you'd like to practice the whole idea of taking away the negative word altogether, in which case you look at the khana and say, maybe ye khana acha hai, mujhe kuch aur khana hai.
Very nice.
And that allows you to at least have an engagement to figure out why do you think that khana is kharab ya tumhe kyun pasand nahi aata hai, and sort of drives the questions inwards.
Very nice.
Perfect. So there we are at chapter 2.
Okay, so let's end this chapter with the Sankalpa Vakya. Hari Om Tat Sat Srimad Bhagwad Gitasu Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Samkhya Yoga Nama Dvitiyodhyayah. I think what we also need to understand is, and we brought in Kathopanishad here, Eika, is that in the Sankalpa Vakya we say Srimad Bhagwad Gitasu Upanishadsu. It is almost like an Upanishad. It's not an Upanishad, but it's almost like an Upanishad. The Upanishadic teachings are all present here. And that's
very, very brilliantly, like we had spoken right at the beginning of our series, very brilliantly summarized as life sutras.
Correct.
So I'm going to take this opportunity now, Samir, to summarize what we've focused on in chapter 2. So chapter 2 is the aphoristic summary of chapter 3 to chapter 18. The entire Bhagwad Gita covers all the concepts and enumerates them, and that's why Samkhya Yoga. However, the 3 topics that we're picking up right here, which will form the foundation of a lot of our conversations going forward from chapter 3 to chapter 18. The first one is, of course, the dropping of your ego. Till you drop your ego, you do not learn, you do not grow, you do not evolve.
correct.
And in order to be able to drop your ego, it is very important to be aware of who you are, and that's that journey as well, from koham to soham, in figuring out कि मैं क्या हूँ, मैं कौन हूँ. And for that, the first step is de-identifying ourselves with our intellect, our body, or our mind. So we are not only what we do, what we think, or what we feel, but if we can just establish awareness of those and distill ourselves to say that I am beyond my body, beyond my mind, beyond my intellect. So that's the first one, being aware of what we do and being able to distance ourselves from it. The second learning that we spoke of, or the second concept we spoke of, was the idea of karma. Of course, we will be talking about it in absolutely great detail later on, but right now, for right now, it is important for us to understand that karmanye vadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana is not about saying that karma karte jao and don't bother about the phala. On the contrary, it says know what your phala is, and on that, depending on what your phala is, focus on the process, focus on the here and the now, focus on what you need to do here, now and today to make sure, and then trust the process that the consequences of the action and the results of that will happen subsequently. We will be talking a lot more about it. It's also very important here to remember that when you focus on the process here and the now and do your karma, it must be done to the best of your ability. That's the second principle that we are going to take away and discuss further. And the third one, which is about the ladder of fall, or the ladder of rise, as you choose to see it, which starts with our senses, moves on to our attachment, to desire, to anger, to therefore delusion, to corruption of our memory, and therefore absolute and utter destruction of our judgment and sense of discrimination. And it's very easy to just flip the ladder. As Samir said, the ladder which goes up also comes down. So we start seeing it differently, and we start focusing on flipping the perspective, creating alternate neural pathways. We will be talking about this in the future as well, Samir, when we talk about flipping the perspective, about neuroplasticity. We will explain it from Western science as well, but it starts from just the awareness of your words. And our urge to you this week, the activity or the practice we'd like you to focus on this week, is the practice of not using the negative words and seeing how that changes. First, your words. Second, your attitude. Third, your own perspectives and your sense of judgment and your engagement with your own self. With that, we welcome you again to this chapter 2 on Samkhya Yoga from the Bhagwad Gita.
Oh, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Harihi Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Na 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 na.